Imagine walking through the heart of Rome, the empire at its height. The air smells of incense and heat, and all roads lead to the impossible presence of the emperor. But today, in 67 AD, something is profoundly different. All eyes are fixed not on Nero, but on the figure beside him, graceful, adorned, regal. A whisper cuts the air, a collective gasp of recognition and horror. This is not a woman. He is Sporus, and what Nero did to him remains one of the most disturbing episodes of psychological and physical domination in the history of absolute power. This is a story that transcends mere historical anecdote, delving into the darkest corners of human obsession, the malleability of identity, and the terrifying reach of unchecked imperial authority. For history buffs, classical scholars, LGBTQ+ studies, and psychology enthusiasts alike, the tale of Sporus offers a chilling academic study of power, gender, and trauma. They say Nero wept when Poppæa Sabina died. The circumstances of her death in 65 AD remain shrouded in controversy, a testament to the volatile nature of imperial power. Some accounts, notably from Tacitus, suggest Nero kicked her in a fit of rage while she was pregnant, leading to her demise. Others hint at a more complex, perhaps accidental, tragedy. Regardless of the precise cause, Poppæa's death plunged Nero into a profound, pathological grief. She was not merely his wife, she was his confidant, his political ally, and, by many accounts, the only person who truly understood the depths of his narcissistic personality. Her sudden absence left a gaping void in his psyche, a wound that festered into a terrifying obsession. This was not just sorrow, it was a rupture with reality. Poppæa Sabina, beautiful, cunning, adored, was gone, and in her absence, Nero's love curdled into a madness that sought to defy death itself. His grief became a destructive force, not only for himself but for anyone unfortunate enough to become entangled in his desperate attempt to resurrect the past. This psychological breakdown, fueled by absolute power, set the stage for the tragedy that would befall Sporus. Sporus was a young man, likely no older than 15, a freedman raised within the labyrinthine walls of the imperial palace. He was described as intelligent, quiet, and obliging, qualities that might have allowed him to navigate the treacherous currents of court life unnoticed. But what caught Nero's eye was not his intellect or demeanor. It was his face. The resemblance to the deceased empress, Poppæa, was haunting. The delicate curve of the cheekbone, the soft eyes, the subtle contours of his features, Nero didn't see a boy. He saw a ghost, a spectral echo of his lost love. This was a classic case of psychological projection, where Nero sought to impose his internal world onto an external reality, bending it to his will. And ghosts, in Nero's Rome, could be dressed, reshaped, remade. The emperor summoned his physicians, not for healing, but for a grotesque transformation. What followed was not medicine but mutilation. In an age where infection was often a death sentence, and surgical procedures were rudimentary and agonizing, Sporus was subjected to a forced orchiectomy. This brutal act, intended to feminize him, was a profound violation, a physical erasure of his male identity. It was a sacrifice, not to save a life, but to fulfill a madman's fantasy. The trauma inflicted upon Sporus, both physical and psychological, would be immeasurable, marking him forever. With his body irrevocably altered, Sporus was then subjected to a relentless process of psychological and social re-education. They gave him a new name, Sabina, the very name of the dead empress. This was more than a mere renaming, it was an act of identity theft, a complete usurpation of his personhood. He was dressed in Poppæa's wardrobe, adorned with her jewels, and even perfumed with her signature scents. Every external marker of his former self was systematically stripped away and replaced. He was taught to walk differently, with the graceful, flowing movements expected of a Roman noblewoman. He learned to gesture with softness, to speak in a higher, more delicate tone, and to adopt the demure expressions and smiles that were characteristic of Poppæa. He was forced to vanish inside her memory, to become a living, breathing simulacrum of the deceased empress. This was a chilling example of coercive control, a complete subjugation of one individual's will and identity to another's pathological desire. And then, the ultimate public declaration of this grotesque fantasy, a wedding. Nero married Sporus in a ceremony that rivaled any royal union in Roman memory. Oil lamps lit the great hall, senators bowed, and guests applauded, their faces a mask of polite deference. But beneath every forced smile was a palpable unease, a collective recognition of the emperor's escalating madness. This was no ordinary political marriage, it was the coronation of obsession, the public binding of fantasy to flesh, a horrifying spectacle of imperial power gone awry. For 2 years, Sporus was treated as Rome's empress, a living doll in Nero's macabre play. He traveled in state, carried in a gilded litter, veiled and seated like a queen. He received dignitaries, sat at Nero's side during public performances, and played the role of a wife to a man who ruled 60 million souls. And he played it perfectly, for failure was unthinkable. The consequences of breaking character, of revealing the boy beneath the silk, would have been unimaginable. Every gesture was rehearsed, every glance calibrated. He lived in rooms filled with Poppæa's favorite flowers, wore her perfume, and dined on her favorite meals. In Nero's deranged mind, she had returned, resurrected through the forced transformation of Sporus. This constant performance, this relentless suppression of his true self, must have been an agonizing psychological burden. Sporus was not merely acting, he was living a fabricated identity, a prisoner within his own body. He was gone, swallowed by the role he was forced to play. A boy without a name, a shadow in silk, his original identity systematically erased. This period highlights the profound dehumanization inherent in absolute power, where individuals become mere instruments for the gratification of a ruler's desires. Sporus became a symbol of Nero's unchecked narcissism and his terrifying ability to warp reality to fit his delusions, a chilling testament to the fragility of individual identity under tyranny. By 68 AD, the illusion began to crumble, mirroring the disintegration of Nero's empire. Rebellion flared across the provinces, the Senate turned against him, and even the loyal Praetorian Guard abandoned their emperor. The political landscape of Rome, once firmly under Nero's tyrannical grip, descended into chaos. As Nero fled into exile, a desperate and increasingly isolated figure, Sporus remained by his side. Even in his final, frantic hours, the emperor could not part from the illusion he had so meticulously created. Sporus was not a companion in the traditional sense, he was a psychological anchor, a tangible link to a past Nero desperately clung to. He was a relic of a sanity that had long since departed, a constant reminder of the emperor's lost love and his desperate attempt to reclaim it. This unwavering presence, even amidst the collapse of his world, underscores the depth of Nero's pathological attachment to Sporus as a substitute for Poppæa. When Nero finally took his own life, uttering the infamous words, "Qualis artifex perio, what an artist dies in me," Sporus was left behind. He was not a person to be freed, but an object, a curiosity, a symbol of fallen glory. His fate was now in the hands of the new powers, who saw him not as a human being, but as a living testament to Nero's depravity, a macabre trophy to be paraded and exploited. His ordeal, far from over, was about to take an even darker turn. After Nero's death, Sporus became a pawn in the brutal power struggles that followed. He was passed from one man to another, a living testament to Nero's excesses, a curiosity to be displayed. He was briefly taken by Nymphidius Sabinus, a Praetorian prefect, and later by Otho, one of the emperors who briefly succeeded Nero. Each transfer was a further degradation, a reminder that he was not seen as an individual with rights or autonomy, but as property, a historical artifact. His ultimate fate was decreed by Emperor Vitellius, a man known for his cruelty and debauchery. Vitellius, seeking to further humiliate Nero's memory and entertain the Roman populace, conceived of a grotesque public spectacle. Sporus would be paraded in the arena, forced to reenact the myth of Proserpina, the goddess who was kidnapped and violated by Pluto. The implication was clear: Sporus, dressed as Proserpina, would be publicly raped in the arena, a horrifying climax to his forced feminization and objectification. This was the final, unbearable indignity. A boy who had been renamed, reshaped, and rewritten, stripped of his identity and subjected to unimaginable trauma, was now facing the ultimate public humiliation and violation. But before that day arrived, Sporus made one final, profound decision. He took his own life. In this act, he reclaimed something that had been denied him for years: agency. He chose his own end, refusing to be a spectacle, refusing to be further violated. It was a desperate, tragic assertion of self in the face of absolute annihilation. Sporus was never given the chance to live a life of his own choosing. He was a reflection of power, of madness, of obsession. His existence was a forced performance, a living testament to the corrosive effects of unchecked imperial authority and the psychological pathology of a tyrannical ruler. He was a victim of extreme gender-based violence, a forced transition, and the complete erasure of his personal identity. But in his death, he reclaimed something that had been denied him: agency. His story is not a mere footnote of imperial decadence or a salacious detail for gossip. It is a profound tragedy of identity, a chilling warning about the corrosion of power, and the devastating human cost of being turned into a fantasy. For those studying LGBTQ+ history, Sporus's story, while not one of consensual identity, offers a disturbing historical precedent for forced gender nonconformity and the violence inherent in denying an individual's true self. History remembers Nero, often with a morbid fascination for his excesses. Let us remember Sporus, not just as a victim, but as a symbol of the human spirit's desperate struggle for autonomy, even in the face of unimaginable oppression. His story compels us to analyze the psychological dynamics of power, the historical context of gender and identity, and the enduring trauma inflicted by those who seek to control and redefine others. If this deep dive into the darker corners of history resonates with you, if you seek to understand the complex interplay of power, identity, and human resilience, then join our community. Subscribe to our channel for more forgotten stories, historical analyses, and academic studies that challenge conventional narratives. Share this video to spark a conversation about the enduring lessons from the past. Your engagement helps us unearth more of these crucial, often disturbing, historical truths.